So we're gonna continue reading from our book Family Life from St. Paisios, and we've jumped around to different sections, um, and in this section here it speaks about work and spiritual life. So we're gonna be reading from page 198 in Family Life. Love of work. Gironda. Why do so many people feel bored at work? He responds, St. Paisios, maybe it's because they don't love their job. Did we read that last time? Do you remember? Okay, we'll read it. Maybe it's because 180. 180. Maybe it's because they don't love their job, or maybe their work has become too much of a routine. With some jobs, say at a factory where they make doors and window frames, a laborer might be doing the same thing from the time he starts his shift until the time he leaves. Place the glue. Another worker may only apply the glass to the frame, yet another applies the putty to the window frame. They constantly do the same job, one monotonous thing over and over again, and their supervisor is always over their shoulder watching them. Not for just 1 or 2 days either. It's always the same old, to the point of boredom. But it wasn't like that in the old days. Back then a carpenter would be given 4 walls from the contractors and was expected to present the owner with a finished house and the key. He would have built the floors, the doors, the window frames, and would even have set the windows with putty. Afterwards, he would have built spiral staircases, turned banisters. After that, he would have painted, built the cupboards and the shelves, even the furniture. Even if he didn't do all of it himself, he knew how to do it. In a pinch, a carpenter could even put the tiles on the roof. A lot of people today are tormented because they don't love what they do for a living. They can't wait until it's time to go. However, when one has zeal for work, and when one cares about the things he makes, the more he works, the more his zeal grows. He is immersed in his work, and when it's time to leave, he asks, where did the time go? He even forgets to eat, to rest. He forgets everything. He may not have eaten, but he is not hungry. He may not have slept, but he is not sleepy, and may even rejoice over not needing sleep. It's not that he's suffering from hunger or sleeplessness. For him, his work is a feast, and he enjoys it. To note here, as we know from the life of St. Paisios, he was a carpenter. And so what he's speaking about is what he's familiar with. And he used to, make furniture and such things. He learned the art of carpentry. And he speaks about a real thing in our life today, that we've really lost people who master certain things. Most things are set up in a way so that they're factorized, or they become like a factory. They're, so much so that we even start creating machines to take place of the people who do those monotonous jobs. And ultimately, I think what he's getting at here is he's saying, he says we have to have zeal for our work. We have to have zeal for our work. Whatever we are doing, we have to have zeal for it as an offering to God and something that we can offer to His glory. If that's not the case, and we have to examine whether that's because of my own selfishness and my own ego, that I just want to not work. That's one aspect of it, wanting to not work, versus seeing that this isn't maybe the gifts and talents that our Lord has given me to do. But while I'm here and while I have it, I will do it to the best of my ability. This is the important thing. Wherever we are at the moment, we should give it our all. And then as we examine our life and see maybe it's not the best thing or the right thing, we then aim to do something different. And again, I often use this example because it was always very, it struck me to see the nuns at the monastery when they were at Life Giving Spring, when they were building their road or their walls. It was the nuns who were laying the bricks. It was the nun who was driving the tractor and digging and all these things. And it's because if that's the task that's given to them, they're going to do it to the best of their ability. They don't sit and whine and complain about, oh, that's not my thing. I'm not a digger. I'm not a bricklayer. No, if this is what's given to me, then let me do it faithfully. And so we have to examine both of these things. We might realize that, yes, like this task, even though I'm seeking to do it faithfully, there's something more. There's something more that I need to be offering. And you examine that with a spiritual guide so that you're not maybe deceiving yourself, thinking, yourself as something or should be doing something that's of a certain caliber or whatnot and is coming more from vanity or pride rather than, what gifts you actually have. The question is posed now, Yoronda, how is it that of two people who do the same work, one is spiritually benefited by what he does, while the other is spiritually harmed? It depends on how each one does the work and what one has within him. If one works with humility and love, everything will be illumined, full of light and graceful, and he will feel inner repose, inner peace, inner stillness. But if one has prideful thoughts, imagining that he does the work better than the others, he may have a sense of satisfaction, but it doesn't fill his heart, for his soul doesn't sense it. He has no inner repose. If one doesn't do his work with love, he gets tired and weary. Such a person, merely by looking at the hill he has to climb in order to finish a job, tires simply because he doesn't love that work. The one who loves his work will go up and down the hill numerous times without realizing it. One can be digging in the sun for hours and not get tired simply because he loves what he's doing. But if his heart is not in doing the work, he'll keep stopping, loafing around and complaining. Oh, it's so hot, he says, and he suffers. Yoronda, can a person be so immersed in his career or his work that he neglects his family? A person should simply like his work. He shouldn't fall in love with it. If he doesn't love his work, he will be doubly tired, bodily and mentally, such that even bodily rest will be of no benefit because he will be mentally weary. You see, it is this mental weariness which exhausts a person. When someone puts his heart into his work and is happy, he is mentally at rest and his physical tiredness disappears. I know a general in the army who still does all the work done by the soldiers. He has such love for his soldiers. He is like a father to them. He experiences such joy helping them. He does his duty and really enjoys it. Once he set out at midnight from the Iveros River to go to Larissa on the feast day of Saint Achilles. He wanted to get there in time for the Divine Liturgy, even though he would have been perfectly justified in being late and only attending the special doxology that would be sung for the feast day. But he thought to himself, I must be there from the start to honor the saint. He does everything with his heart. The gratification felt by those who do their work with philoptimo is a good and wholesome gratification. It has been given by God so that his creation will not tire. This is the true rest from tiredness. So there's multiple things here, and then that question initially was posed, can a work cause a person to neglect their family? And absolutely that is the case. And he says here, a person should simply like his work. He shouldn't fall in love with it. But then he says if he doesn't love his work, he will be doubly tired. And so we see that there's this balance between the work that you have to do and you're serving it faithfully with love, even love for God and love for what is being offered to his glory, which then, having everything in perspective, knows its place, and when that has to stop for the sake of the responsibilities that you have, your family or whatever it is, versus an imbalanced life which has such a devoted love for such a, I should say, this falling in love with your work that is so dedicated to it, not dedicated, it's immersed in it, that you forget everything else, which actually shows itself that it's coming from the passions. That it's by the passions that one is so immersed in this work that they neglect the other needs. And so one constantly has to examine what that is, or where they are in this work, and how that relates to everything else in their life, especially if they have a family. But I would say, even if you don't have a family and you work, you have to be careful that you're not just giving all your time to work. Are you neglecting your life of prayer? Is work going along with your life of prayer? These are important things to consider. And even if you're not married, what about your parents or your relatives who maybe need you, or people who you have the ability to be able to serve? Are you neglecting them so you can continue in a certain work? Why are you continuing that certain work, and so on? So those are important things to examine and even take spiritual counsel on. Yeah.
I've read a little bit in, I think it's a Metropolitan, his little book on how to live a holy life, walks through a day, and he gives a lot of strategies for remembering God in your work and devoting it to Him. But I find that, I do get caught up, I get focused on what I'm doing and I don't remember to say a prayer. Or are there any, tips you would have on how to bring your mind back to God in the middle of a busy day?
Yeah, I would always start at the end. So seek to always begin with prayer, asking God to bless what you do. Ending your day with then thanksgiving and prayer, examining how you did. Those two things will allow you to draw closer to the middle. So with that, then, some practical things might be setting an alarm. Or do you take a natural break for something else? Like most people take a break for lunch. Well, make sure that break for lunch is also a break for prayer and a something to cultivate your attention to Christ, so that you can be more inclined towards that as you go along with everything else. And so utilizing natural breaks in your day, setting, for example, if you're on a computer often, setting an icon at your computer, but not vainly, meaning just as an art piece, but making sure that as part of your day, you look at the icon and ask the intercession of the saints, pray to Christ or the Mother of God, kiss the icon as it should be kissed, or else it just becomes something that's there and you quickly forget about it, and it just becomes another ornament of your office or your workspace. So those sorts of things can help, but I think especially utilizing the beginning and the end, seeking to pray and ask God to bless what you do, holding on to that prayer as much as you can, examining the end and how you did, and how maybe you lost prayer and lost yourself in your work, and then having a plan for the next day as a desire to stay attentive, and then trying again the day after. Yeah.
I wonder, because St. Paisios spoke Greek, if he's talking about a different type of love in those circumstances, like eros or agape.
Yeah, there could be. It could be, and I think maybe they would have kind of emphasized that differentiation if there was that. But I think in general, clearly there's a difference when he's speaking about falling in love with it, and then he goes on to speak about if he doesn't love his work, he will be doubly tired. So clearly there's this balance, and we have to understand that, okay, what is meant by this love, and how that incorporates itself in my work, in my family, and so on. And we find then real love, true love, has its brings about a balance in a life that has as its center glorifying God and being faithful to Him. And in doing so, that doesn't mean neglecting your family, but being faithful to your responsibilities there, while being faithful to your work as well. And so therefore you see that there's a need to find that balance between those two things. Yeah. Yeah.
So I just heard a priest monk talking about how I think he said once you become a Christian, nothing good that happens in your life, meaning like worldly success. Like he was saying, then 99% of the time, like you're not going to be successful necessarily. And it was actually kind of helpful for me to think about it, especially when it relates to work. But just in terms of like not seeking, I guess, honor or glory at your work, but I'm from the Protestant background where it's like Christians stand out at work because we work so hard and we're so, we have such a strong work ethic. It sounds like that's kind of what St. Paisios is getting at, that maybe that we just have a different approach to work.
I don't think it's a Protestant thing to consider that our dedication to our work has an essential nature in our Christian life. What does our Christian life call us to? To be faithful in everything we do. And so when we work, we do it with all attention and care for it being the best that is offered. In that, there is a potential for great success. But because of the nature of Christianity in our world today, there's also very much the potential of being rejected and having no success. This maybe, especially we can compare it to the modern false understanding of prosperity, that if you're really faithful to God, everything should go well. And if it's not going well and your work is suffering and all this, it's because you're not being faithful. No, in fact, even when things are going well, we should quickly examine how we're not being faithful and how all of it is a gift from God. And even if things are not going well, that's even a gift from God. And to give thanks to God even for that. But our work is continuously to seek to be very faithful in whatever it is. With thanksgiving. So I think there is the potential, definitely, for a Christian to be very successful in their work. But God will not allow that if it's going to destroy their soul. So humility is needed. Humility is needed. That seems quite a high percentage to say, like, whoa, like, really? Just
some people, God still needs his churches built, so some people will be quite successful. But.
Yeah, exactly. I think there's a reality to the fact that as we progress in how society is going now, there's a reality that more and more to be Christian, you won't be able to be Christian in the workplace, which will cause Christians to make difficult decisions. Can a Christian continue to be a doctor when being a doctor requires you to perform unchristian procedures, nurses and so on? This is a real thing. Can a Christian continue to be a professor in a university if you're required to believe and teach certain things that you don't agree with? And so on and so forth. And so there's a reality that it might be difficult to have certain careers and jobs if you're a Christian. But whatever we have, we'll seek to be as faithful as we can. Thinking about St. John the Russian, who was a slave to his Turkish master, but sought to be very faithful in that, and to serve them faithfully and pray for his master and all that. And what an incredible life. So. Each one must spiritually develop his gift. Each person should develop his gift for the good, because God, in giving it in the first place, has some expectations. The mind, for example, is such a gift of power, but depending on how one uses it, can be used for good or evil. If someone who is very bright uses his mind properly, he may be able to invent things which will help people. But if he doesn't use his mind properly, he might invent, let's say, a way to rob his neighbor. Or, for example, those who create political cartoons for newspapers can present an entire event in one sketch. If this event has something to do with ecclesiastical issues, the sketch could also reveal a complete theological perspective. Since their minds take such sharp turns, if some of these political cartoonists had studied theology, they would have been able to fathom the depths of divine meanings. That is, they could have developed this nimbleness of the mind. They could have sanctified it and they could have helped themselves and others. But instead, a lot of them do negative work, obscene if they are obscene, ridiculous if they are ridiculous. In other words, those with some exceptional ability will become either useful or destructive, whereas those who do not have some exceptional ability won't be able to do great good, but at least they also won't be able to do great harm. To examine that a little bit, everyone has certain gifts and they need to be used. The mind he gives here is an example. And then we know that everyone's mind is able to fathom various things, or to comprehend certain things to different levels, and process things at different levels. And what came to my mind as we were reading this is our scientists. Scientists, especially as with my background in chemistry, what an incredible thing that God allows us to understand His creation to such degrees. And these things don't have to go against God, but in fact allow us to see the greatness of God more and more, and even to be able to learn how in His creation He has given us ways of being able to heal the human body, for example. But with such a great mind, taking these things, separating them from God, these things can then become destructive. And so we have this struggle in our world today of trying to navigate this versus this. Is this actually good or not? As we, in our modern time, are dealing with this notion of using, for example, aborted fetal stem cells for scientific study. And the fact that we've been able to take cells in general and be able to process them and understand them to such a degree is incredible. But is it worth going through and allowing the process of abortion to feed development of science, right? And so we see how, the incredible gift of the mind and to be able to understand things can also take turns towards evil and cause harm to our society, and how in our days today we have to navigate these things carefully, especially as Christians. We'll read this last little section here called Anxiety and Work. A lot of people are irritated when they come home from work. St. Paisios responds, I advise men to find a church after work. Go inside, light a candle, and sit quietly for 10 to 15 minutes. Or to go and sit in a park and read a small section of the gospel, so as to wind down a bit, and then to go to their homes, peacefully and smiling, instead of being irritated and ready to pick a fight. They shouldn't bring their problems at work home with them. They ought to leave them outside. But Yoronda, some of them are justified, for the responsibility they have at work fills them with anxiety. St. Paisios responds, it fills them with anxiety because they don't involve God in their affairs. Even the sluggard who says, oh, well, God will provide, is better than they are. I prefer someone is an employee and do his work with philoptimo, but that he simplify his life, that he restricts himself to the essentials, and that he keep his mind free from worry, rather than be a factory owner who constantly whines and moans because he's usually in debt. Pride gets in the way, so he says, I'll take this much of a loan so that I can produce this and that in order to better arrange things for myself. Then he finds that he's miscalculated. He goes bankrupt and he has to sell everything and so forth. There are also many people who don't put their mind to work. They just get pointlessly tired without having done any work. Then they can't respond to what is expected of them, and they get anxious. For example, someone wants to learn a certain trade, but doesn't pay any attention. So he comes and goes for years on end without making any progress. because he never uses his mind. He has to figure out what he will need for his work and then go about getting it. Look, when I worked in the world as a carpenter, I realized that I needed a lathe for the furniture I made. What should I have done? Should I have gone to find someone to do the work for me? No, I got myself a lathe and learned how to use it. Next, I saw that I needed to make spiral staircases. So I sat down myself, called to mind the math and geometry I had learned, and figured out how to make them. If you don't use your mind, you end up tormenting yourself. In other words, what I want to emphasize is that one should put his mind to work, because at work one faces a whole heap of challenges. In this way, he will become a good craftsman, and from then on, he will know what to do, and he will be able to proceed. That's the key. The mind ought to be creative in all matters. Otherwise, man remains underdeveloped and wastes his time. So I think this is really important. Some really important practical things before going into your homes after work. Regroup, right? And maybe, if you can make it to the church, awesome. If there is no church to be able to go to a park, great. To even just sit in your car before walking into the house, read from the scriptures, and allow that to bring you back, to settle down, to have peace. This is a very important thing. But then he goes on to talk about the anxiety that comes up, and he goes into this important aspect of using the mind. Sometimes the work that we do isn't so creative. It doesn't use the mind so much. Sometimes it does, and it's very, in fact, exhausting in that way, but that's usually of great benefit to us. But if we don't have a job that stimulates our mind enough, we should take up also a craft of sorts that allows us to do something good using our mind in a creative way. But also, we should use our minds in caring for others. This is another beautiful thing. To go visit someone we love and to engage in our minds in a conversation with another person. To allow ourselves to care for another person. And in this could be of great benefit as well, getting outside of ourselves. What happens with anxiety? We're getting into ourselves, we're getting worked up about what we did or didn't do, what we could have done or what we want to do, and all this, and it's kind of like really into ourselves. But if we can get out of ourselves through prayer, through caring for others and whatnot, this really allows us to find that really the great joy and peace that Christ offers to us. Any questions or reflections about that?
It also reminds me of kind of like setting a goal within your work of like how to improve. Is that also appropriate?
I think that's an important aspect of being creative with your work, is looking at how you can do it better, how you can be more faithful to it. Yes, what can you do different, if there's any room for that? You know what I mean? Unless you're told, put this here every single time. Okay, but you might see, okay, I can put it here with 2 fingers instead of like a whole hand, and how you can do it finally and even organize it, and who knows? Every person's situation is different. But to allow the mind to be able to serve God in this creative way, maybe if your work doesn't allow for that, find something else that allows for that. I mean, really, for example, like think about the life in the church and how you can serve your church. Maybe you find that after work you can come and do some work at the church in caring for its grounds or something that allows you to think about how to make this beautiful and how to organize this. I mean, even sometimes I have to get on the subdeacons or the altar servers when they go put a candle in the candle stand. It's like, don't you see it's crooked? You know what I mean? We got to make it straight to have it beautiful. And so to be attentive to these things and use our minds to be, making sure how things are offered to God in a beautiful way. And so, yes, to figure out how to use our minds as an offering to God. All right, well, God bless you. We'll end there.